Welcome back. The Gary Sutton Show here on WOYK 734 on a Wednesday morning. What is that?
Well, the song was a huge hit, but see if you can see Matthew.
Last night I had the strangest dream.
Yeah, he's.
I sailed away to China.
He had one other minor hit, but this song was a big hit.
It was. I remember
Matthew Wilder, Break My Stride. 1984 is the year that we are highlighting in our bumper music this morning.
He wasn't related to Laura Wilder, right?
No, he just, it's kind of interesting that when video came around,
right,
you had, a lot of the rock and roll types all, they were very successful in their imaging. But there were a couple of artists, and I think Matthew Wilder was one of them, where he did not look like
what you were hearing,
or even sound like to some extent. Well, you look at him, and there were a couple of others. I think the most notable of the bunch was a guy named. Now all of a sudden, he opened for Queen when I saw Queen in Philly.
Okay.
"Lonely Is the Night" is a big song of his. I have to look it up so I can. Anyway, he was a great rocker. You listen to his stuff. It's great. But the video, he didn't really look the part of a rock and roll guy.
Okay.
And he went away. It just like all of a sudden.
Yeah, you got a match.
It was unfortunate.
You got a match. Anyway, 7:36 here on a Wednesday morning. And we welcome in my friend Dennis Owens from ABC 27 News, who is at the gym right now. The last time we had him on, he was making breakfast. This morning, he's at the gym. Heaven only knows where he'll be the next time we talk to him. But good morning, Dennis. How are you?
I'm well, Gary. How are you? And the last time I saw you, you were in a gym. You were at the Trinity Bishop McDevitt basketball game.
Yes, that's exactly right. We saw each other a few weeks ago in a game that got a little testy at the end, as I recall. And it was an interesting game. But Dennis came over. We were gabbing a little bit about things. And anyway, you were gabbing yesterday, I think, with the governor about some ideas on this governor's budget proposal, right?
Well, I didn't get a chance to gab. I was listening to him gab. I didn't have a chance to talk to him.
You were hearing the gab.
Ask him direct questions. I was hearing the gab and taking notes during the gab, and it was 93 minutes. Just to give you a comparison, one of Tom Wolfe's budget addresses was 22 minutes.
Wow.
So, yeah. But for the first time in Pennsylvania history, a governor is asking for more than $50 billion, and significantly more, actually. He's asking for $51.5 billion.
Wow. Okay, so tell me a little bit. I saw where he was going to be asking more for schools and transit and emphasizing frugality. Did that come to pass in his proposal?
Emphasizing, did you say frugality?
Frugality, yes. He was going to emphasize frugality.
My friend, of all the words I would use to talk about this budget, frugality would be the last one.
Okay,
I would use to talk. But now let's be clear. He wants a lot of things for a lot of people, and on their face, all of the programs seem very legitimate.
Right.
The question Republicans have is, how are we paying for it? Like, I think it would be lovely and educational to take my family to Tahiti. That would be a great thing. It would be very positive. Good for everyone.
Right.
But, who's paying for it?
Well,
it's part of the question.
And one of the things that comes at a time right now, I understand, where we have like a $10.5 billion in reserve in the budget, a surplus, a pretty enormous surplus, when the fiscal year ends on June 30th. Is that true right now?
Well, here's the deal. You have two things. You have reserves, and you have a $7 billion plus rainy day fund.
Got it.
If this plan were to go, it would exhaust the reserves and dip about $1.5 billion into the rainy day fund.
Okay. So
there's going to be resistance, I can assure you, on the spend. But, Josh Shapiro, his first two budgets, has done very well from his perspective, at least as far as getting lots of what he wants and spending money. But much of that, as you recall, was federal stimulus dollars. Much of it was federal stimulus dollars, and that's really what we've been able to put all that money in the rainy day fund as well. But that has dried up, as you know.
Now, we spent, $7.6 billion this past year, or in this fiscal year right now, that we're going to, which was like a 6% increase. So this $55 billion represents...
51.5.
Sorry.
7.5% increase.
Gotcha. Okay, 7.5% increase. So what were the things that stood out to you yesterday as you were taking your notes and getting all what the governor had for you?
Well, just the wish list is very large, and I don't know that there's enough genies in the legislature to grant him all of his wishes.
Right.
But having said that, some of the highlights: no income tax increase. Of course, that's not on the table. But he does want to. He called for the increasing the minimum wage, which Groundhog's Day was Sunday, but it felt like Groundhog's Day because for about 10 straight years, Tom will perform. Every year in the budget address, they call for an increase in the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and every year it does not come to pass. He wants to tax and regulate those skills games that have popped up all over the Commonwealth. He estimates and said there's 70,000 of those machines out there. Let's be clear, every single day, somebody, somewhere, is making millions and millions of dollars on those things, and they're not regulated and they're not taxed. He proposed, it's in fact the story I'm going to do for later today. He wants those machines to be taxed at the same rate as slot machines or the VGT machines. That's 52%. I have a feeling some of those clubs and restaurants that have those machines are going to balk at the thought that I have to give 52 cents on the dollar to the state even before any of that, and 5% of that, so 47% goes to the state, 5% goes to the lottery fund, because Governor Shapiro said those machines are cannibalizing the lottery and costing senior programs money.
Dennis, am I remembering correctly that last year he proposed a $150 million tax on the skill games that are popular in the very kind of places you're talking about, bars, convenience stores, pizzerias, standalone parlors around the state. But lawmakers are looking at that as an idea of raising money here again. Do you think that'll move at all?
Well, I do, because everybody from an objective standpoint looks at it and says, it's ridiculous that these things have proliferated to the way they have, and they've still gone unregulated and untaxed for the most part. And they're all over the place, as you said.
Right.
So he wants to put it under the control of the Gaming Control Board. He wants to tax them on 52%. And he also, I think where are they able to go? I think there's going to be a push to put them in places where you have to have a liquor license. So by the Harrisburg Farm Show, the Burger King has one. There's laundromats that have them.
Right.
There's convenience stores that have them, right across the street from elementary schools, and that kind of thing. I think they're going to try to cut down on who all has them as well. And then, so the other thing is, by the way, lawmakers will say he's estimating it would generate nearly $400 million. And people are saying he's way overestimating that, at least in the first year of what it would bring in. And then the same thing with adult use cannabis, recreational marijuana.
Right.
He wants to legalize that as well. And he says that would bring in close to $500 million in license fees alone.
What's the take of the state assembly on that?
20% tax on the actual sales, but then it's also the license fee. And I'm not sure what that is. I didn't see that in the fine print. I think that has to be worked out, but they just threw in a number of $500 million on license.
Right.
So is there a will for that? You asked. Yes, he did call for both of those last year. The difference is they were flush with cash last year with the surplus in the aforementioned rainy day fund. That money's running out. You need to come up with something that's going to generate revenue to sustain this budget. Because here's the thing, Gary, as we're talking about this budget. They'll do a budget, but you're locking in future legislatures and future government officials to some numbers because they never go backwards.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
If you go to 51.5 this year, that's the floor for next year.
I talked to him one time about it would be nice to see us get to, and you're watching President Trump on a federal level trying to do some of this right now with a lot of executive orders, the idea of accountability and efficiency in government. And I know I talked to the governor one time when he was on our show, and I said something about zero-based budgeting kind of attitude, where you go back and evaluate every dollar that's spent each year. And he said, I'd like to get back to that. But again, it's like, have you stopped kicking your dog yet? Everybody would answer, yeah, I'd like to get back to that. But does anyone ever have the stomach for doing on the state level what President Trump is maybe trying to do on the national level?
Well, by the way, don't forget, Josh Shapiro did that when he was a commissioner of Montgomery County.
Yeah, he did.
And instantly saved his county several $1 million.
Yeah.
And it's gobsmacking to me. Frankly, this is just me personally, okay? This is not I think that should be happening every year.
I do too.
And every time Donald Trump brings up a program that sounds ludicrous, like, we're paying for, I'm just pulling something out of my, we're paying for DEI programs in Guatemala or whatever.
Right.
People are saying, why are we doing that? And the pushback is, well, that's not very much money. Well,
Right.
you have enough of those programs that are quote unquote not very much money and start to add up to real money.
And not very much gets measured in millions, as I last checked. And when we're doing national programs, and we're finding out some of the, $30 million on condoms in Palestine. And you go, well, wait a second, what's going on here? So, I mean, the idea of going through and starting to go with a fine-tooth comb and saying what's working, what's not working, what bucks were in there before. I mean, we do it in our own budgets, in our own homes, where we go out and say, well, guess what? I don't have a job this year. I'm not going on vacation this year. I'm not going to buy a new car. The idea that we shouldn't do that in the national budget is maybe something whose time has come. I don't know. Your thoughts?
Well, I agree. Well, I agree. And the other part of that problem in that equation is, well, let's say you're a programmer, you're an agency, and you spend $30 million, and you can actually save some money, but there's no incentive for you to save money because you want at least that $30 million next year.
Right.
So you go ahead and spend it, or it's just perverse incentives. And frankly, they should be looking at every line item every year, and they say, well, that would be overwhelming, and that would take time. Well, what else are you doing? And that's the most important thing, in my opinion, you should be doing. And you can't tell me there aren't places to find money. And by the way, when I do get an interview with Josh Shapiro, we will. He's fairly accessible. He's got a $51.5 billion budget on top of last year's close to $49 billion budget. Look, what program would you like to see cut? Where are you making cuts?
That's a great question. Yeah, and it's a good question. I mean, and I think he would probably address that with you and maybe tell you. I think because, as you said, when he was commissioner in Montgomery County, he did do that. Again, what changes? I think that's the thing that American people are asking right now. Pennsylvania's probably asking the same thing. Here's what we do in our lowest form of government, which is the family. This is how we handle things. Why should it be any different as we move forward? Because the government is the extension of the family, is it not?
Exactly. Yes, I agree.
Suck as much as the cowboy.
Sometimes common sense answers, it's a shame it's not common practice.
Right. Well, common sense is that sense which is most times most uncommon, they tell me. But I'm wondering, as we watch we'll see what the attitude is as Trump continues to move forward and throws down changes minute by minute here each day. We'll see if that kind of attitude maybe starts to sift its way down into the states a little bit. I don't know. Final thoughts.
Well, you know what's funny? I mean, obviously Donald Trump is a polarizing figure, and I think it's fair to say that the first couple of weeks have been in fits and starts. But whether you like him or you don't like him, I'm fascinated by some of the things he's trying to do.
I know.
And look, even people that disagree with Donald Trump and don't like Donald Trump have to agree with some of the things he's trying to do. In terms of this, it's just going to be curious to see if he succeeds or not. And but as was it Terrell Owens, the great receiver for the Eagles at one point, who said, "Get your popcorn."
Yep.
With Donald Trump, get your popcorn, because this is just every day there, as you just said, there's a new drama unfolding.
Well, I was struck yesterday by Netanyahu, met with him from Israel, and he's sitting there with him, and Trump says, "We want to take over Gaza. We'll take care of control of it. We'll make it the Riviera of the Middle East." It was one of the things that he threw out there, which was, you go, well, that's nuts. But then Netanyahu said, you know what? He says, and this is about Trump. This is Netanyahu, and I'm paraphrasing. He says, well, he says something that's jaw-dropping every day. And then he said, you sit back and think, geez, I hadn't thought about it that way. So, I mean, maybe that's where people are at right now. I don't know, Dennis, but it's going to be fun to watch, and also going to be interesting to watch the negotiation of this PA budget, because this is the wish list that the governor puts out, and no one's ever going to pass it in totem, and we'll see how much space there is in between. You and I will be chronicling that as we go along. Thank you, my friend, taking time out from your gym time this morning to be with us, but always appreciate you being on. Thanks so much.
Well, there's only 2 words left to say, right? Go Eagles.
Go Eagles. That's exactly right. And we'll see what happens this weekend. As I had a friend yesterday complaining, he said, all you're hearing about is 3 in a row for KC. The Eagles aren't even around. I said, no, I think a lot of people think the Eagles have a legitimate chance. So we'll see what happens, right?
Harry, you heard it here first, and we can talk about it next week. Not only will the Eagles win, they're going to win fairly comfortably.
Oh, my goodness. Dennis Owens with his prediction this morning. Do you have a score?
Yeah, 31-17.
31-17 Eagles. We're going to remember that, Mark. We're going to call you on it next week. And again, you thought Punxsutawney Phil was a good prognosticator. How about dashing Dennis Owens with that?
Well, we can. But all right. You have a great, great weekend.
You too, buddy. Take care. Thanks so much. Dennis Owens from ABC 27 News with us here this morning on the Gary Sutton Show on WOYK, where it is 7:50.